Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth, the Education Coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. Tonight's special guest, and it's always a wonderful pleasure to have you with us, Julia. She is the VP of Education for Enzymedica. Thank you so much, Julia Craven, for being here.
Thanks for having me. I just adore working with you guys, and specifically you, Elizabeth. When I was in the area a few weeks ago, I came into Marlene's Market and I just loved everyone I met. So beautiful, beautiful organization.
Well, thank you. And you have a wonderful topic to share with us tonight. No such thing as just a bad stomach.
So one of the things that I hear most when I'm working with people or even friends and family say, I just have a bad stomach. And it's just accepted. Like, this is just how I'm built and I just have a bad stomach. But it really not only doesn't need to be that way, but there are underlying causes. And this is so many people between heartburn, gas and bloating, constipation and food intolerances. People are they have become accustomed to, I'm just built this way. One of the things that happens with digestive distress is that over time, you don't realize that it's progressing. You don't realize that it's getting worse because it's happening over time. And so you just become accustomed to feeling kind of cruddy in your digestion. So this is a very prevalent issue. And one of the reasons is a lack of digestive enzymes. So every human, we make our own digestive enzymes, and we make them very plentifully when we're younger. This is typically speaking, of course. So as we age, though, digestive enzyme production tends to go down pretty dramatically, especially after about the mid-30s. That's why a lot of people say, well, I didn't used to have food intolerances and now I do. But I always like to take the example of, remember, like when we were in college and we could eat, a pizza and a bunch of beer and then wake up in the morning and feel fantastic and break it down. And as we age, I can say, like, I am nowhere near that place anymore. So digestive enzyme production from our own bodies just tends to go down as we age. And then medications are a huge reason that maybe digestive enzymes are being suppressed in their production. We produce a lot of enzymes in our gastric secretion of our stomach, specifically protein digesting enzymes and fat digesting enzymes. And if we're taking something that's slowing down or stopping those gastric secretions, then we're not getting the best out of enzymes. And that is also not to mention stress. We all know that when we're stressed, we are not digesting as well. But it's not just that our muscular digestive system is slowing down. It's also that we are just not producing as many enzymes, especially in our small intestines during stressful times. And then food. Food is another reason. It's maybe not that we have a lack of enzymes necessarily, but our bodies simply aren't made to eat the volume of food that we do, as well as the denatured food that we eat. So we may actually have just a great amount of enzymes if we were eating purely. And if it's a dietary issue, we just may not be producing enough enzymes. And then environmental toxins can have a huge effect on digestive health. Glyphosates are particularly damaging to the digestive system. Glyphosates actually work by literally exploding the digestive system of the pest. And so if we're getting that on our food over time, it's doing something quite similar to us and can land us with the situation of leaky gut. So enzymes are way more important than most people know. And I like to use this image of the iceberg because the top of the iceberg might be those digestive situations that we all talk about, the occasional heartburn, either the constipation or the irregularity. It can go both ways, or just that bloated, heavy feeling. That's actually just what we're seeing. But what's going on underneath that is the basis of the reason why we're seeing these things. So in America, we tend to have a very Band-Aid approach to digestive issues. We say, if you're experiencing occasional heartburn, here's your heartburn remedy. If you're experiencing gas and bloating, here's your gas remedy. We don't actually really look at what's going on underneath. And that base is often related to slow motility. So just food not going through the digestive system in a fast enough way. It could be incomplete breakdown of foods. And what happens there is that when we get that incomplete breakdown of food, it's hanging out in the gut for a long time. It's creating putrefying and fermenting material in the gut that really is not supposed to be there. We're supposed to be able to have our food completely digested and eliminated from the gut. And then food intolerances are another one that can be really, really foundational to some of those other issues. We may not connect a food intolerance with occasional heartburn, for instance, or we may not connect a food intolerance with feeling really, really gassy, bloaty, and heavy. But oftentimes that is a part of the root of the issue. So I want to encourage people to look at what's going on underneath and learn about that, because it's not the typical medical approach at all. And it certainly is not an OTC bandage approach. So foundations for health with digestion. The first one is that digestion itself takes an immense amount of energy. Very typical energy expenditure on a meal is about 25% of the calories that are in the meal can be spent in digestion. Now, that's very different depending on if it's a protein or a fat or a carbohydrate. Those levels vary, but a good average can be 25%. And that isn't taking into consideration nutrient bioavailability and all of the other things that happen right after, the breakdown of the food has occurred. And then the stronger your digestive system, the more nutrients you're going to derive from your food. So when we're in situations where our digestive system has been compromised for a long time, a lot of times what does occur is nutrient deficiencies. This is really common in situations like celiacs, where it's been going on for a long time, but it went undiscovered. And then people end up in these nutrient deficient conditions, which then makes the whole problem even worse because we're just not getting the nutrition from our food. And then healthy digestion too supports the microbiome, again, due to that enhanced food breakdown and subsequently enhanced healthy detoxification. All of these things are how our digestion is supposed to work. We're not supposed to have to spend so much energy on digestion because ideally we wouldn't have historically eaten the size of foods, the size of meals that we do now. And then we're supposed to be able to get all the nutrients from our food, be able to liberate the nutrients from our food. But because we have either intestinal damage, we're not producing enough of our own enzymes, or the food has no enzymes in it anymore because it's been denatured, we're unable to do that. And then what happens is the microbiome is compromised. When we have that decaying food in the gut, we start to set up a situation which has body-wide effects. We all know how important the microbiome is for whole body health. Like, you can't go a day and not hear about the microbiome and some cool new discovery that's been made. So foundation number one is that it's not just what you eat, it is what you digest. So if we look at fats, the enzyme to break down fats is lipase. We create a lot of lipase in our lower stomach. So just imagine that you're taking a medication that shuts that down. We're now compromised and didn't even know it. Maybe we were taking a medication that helps to shut down stomach acid because we have that occasional heartburn. But did we even know that we were shutting down a big part of lipase production? And then think about all the people who don't have gallbladders on top of it. A lot of lipase is created in our pancreas and it's secreted at the time of eating through our gallbladder. So now we're getting a double whammy where we can't even begin to absorb the positive nutrients that come out of these fats, the avocados, the beautiful, pressed olive oils, the coconut. If we can't absorb our fats, we're compromised in all of our tissue regeneration, but especially think about this, we're compromised in brain health. We know that it is so important to have a high degree of quality fats for brain health and brain function. Now, protease is the enzyme that helps to break down protein. Absolutely essential because we have to be able to get to those amino acids that are encased in our food. Amino acids are the building blocks of life. We don't get cellular regeneration without amino acids. We don't grow new tissue without amino acids. This is absolutely vital. And again, if we're not producing enough of our own, what's happening is that settling in the gut and putrefying over time. And that can feel a lot like distension. It can also feel a lot like a setup for things like SIBO and IBS and other bigger conditions, all just because we're not breaking down our food. It's like the simplest thing. And yet this is going, it's not often talked about when we're thinking about typical gastroenterology care. And then amylase and cellulase breaks down those carbs and fibers. And this is really where we find so much deep nutrition in food, all of these beautiful constituents that are in berries and kiwi and nuts. If we are unable to break down those carbohydrate and fiber-rich food, we're simply not getting the nutrition out of them. So again, it is what you eat, but it is even more what you digest. You can have the most beautiful diet in the world, and if you're not breaking it down, you're not getting the benefit of that diet. Next foundation is the enzymes for daily cleansing. I call it, we want to be pretty on the inside. You don't get to be pretty on the outside unless you're pretty on the inside, because that gut, again, can hold up so much toxic, undigested material. And this is just how our bodies are supposed to work. We're supposed to be able to break everything down so that it can move out of the digestive system. There, again, because of the popularity now of the microbiome, I call it the microbiome, first of all. And I like to paint for people the image of, because it's a part of your home, imagine if you never cleaned it. Imagine if you never did your dishes. Imagine if you never swept the floors or did the laundry. It would get pretty cruddy pretty fast, and you're not going to function optimally. It's the same kind of idea with our microbiome. We have to keep it clean. And this doesn't have to be those big cleansing protocols, where we do the 2-week fast and we do the juicing or we buy the little cleanse kit. We can actually accomplish that every day by making sure that our digestive health is in order, and specifically with digestive enzymes. That's what our body would use for it, right? And then foundation number 3 about how digestion uses so much energy. I bring this up because I think a lot of times we think, I have a great diet. I eat really healthy. I'm so dedicated about it. So why am I having digestive problems? Why am I having that occasional heartburn? Why am I constipated sometimes? I eat such a high fiber diet. Well, it's because the average expenditure on energy is actually higher with a whole foods diet than it is with a processed foods diet. And the reason is because it has so much more fiber in it. So I really feel for the folks and talk to people all the time. They're like, I don't get it. I don't understand. I'm doing everything right. I'm eating all the right kinds of foods for me, and yet my digestion is still a mess. It can be because of a lack of enzymes, specifically that cellulase enzyme, that one that helps to break down fiber. That cellulase enzyme, we don't create it in our stomach. We don't create it in our pancreas. We don't create it in our small intestine. Those cellulase enzymes are actually created by the microflora that lives in our gut. So this happens a lot with people who are making a transition to a healthier diet. They just aren't able to break down that fiber because their microflora has been out of whack for so long and it hasn't become rebalanced yet. This is also a great situation to use a broad spectrum digestive enzyme. So who are we? We're Enzymedica, and we have been the makers of the #1 selling digestive enzyme in the natural marketplace for over 20 years in a row. Many people recognize Digest Gold and they don't recognize Enzymedica at all. And that's fine because it has been the top for so long. We have a process of blending enzymes called TheraBlend, which means that the enzymes are working throughout all of the various pH ranges of the digestive system. If you think about your digestive system as neighborhoods, every town has a neighborhood. So we have the stomach neighborhood, we have midtown, we have downtown, we have uptown, and they all have different environments in them, right? All work throughout all of those different communities in the intestinal tract. So our enzymes are really one of the only blends out there, and it's certainly the most comprehensive blend. And that right there is why our product has been #1 for so long, is because it works so completely throughout the digestive system. So As you can see, enzymes are a top go-to solution if we're having problem breaking down foods, if we're having problems with constipation. We're even going to get into how this affects heartburn a little bit later on. But they can also detoxify the intestines of biofilm. So think about the tartar that you get on your teeth. Unfortunately, we can get it in our guts too. Think of it as plaque that settles in our gut, and it really can wreak havoc with being able to absorb the nutrients from food. Obviously, we're going to have more energy because we have more nutrition from our food. And then when we combine it with probiotics, now we've got a really beautiful match. Many people say, I don't need a digestive enzyme. I take a probiotic. Well, probiotics are great. They really help that microbiome area, but they don't directly break down food. So when you take them together, you're getting a beautiful effect. And we use a very, very shelf-stable probiotic called Bacillus subtilis DE111. And what I love about it is that it's proven to survive. It's proven to germinate in the gut within 3 hours of ingestion. So like enzymes work fast, these forms of probiotics work fast as well. And then they have a long life cycle that's very, very good at creating more of those cellulase enzymes. They're like little enzyme creating machines. So it really makes sense why they're together in these formulas. But there's more to it. So we all know about food intolerances, lactose, casein, gluten is so popular. It's like something like 30% of Americans have omitted or are trying to omit gluten from their diet, not because they're celiac, but because they just feel better on a gluten-free diet. So a lot of people are on this diet without actually having that formal diagnosis, myself being one of them, and really are doing much better without the gluten in their life. So there's 3 kinds of situations where we would use enzymes for food intolerances. So the first is just a classic intolerance. Some people call it an enzyme deficiency. And that's when you just don't quite make enough of that kind of enzyme to help to break down the food. Lactase is a great example of that. Lactase is what breaks down dairy sugar. We create lactase in our bodies, but not very much. And so there are those people that are like, look, I know dairy is terrible for me, but don't take away my ice cream. Don't take the cheese. Like, it's an emotional thing. Having recently given up dairy myself, I'm like, I get it. So that is just a kind of a classic intolerance, really easy to address with some enzyme supplementation and food avoidance. I mean, that's really the best thing to do. And then others may experience symptoms when even the small quantity is consumed. And these are what we call the sensitivity. It's up from an intolerance as far as degrees of what kinds of experiences you'll get from ingesting that food. So sensitivities can look like all the gas and bloating and things like that, but it can also look like things that are more systemic, like skin rashes, like achy joints sometimes. Problems with focus are a really, really big one. But this is where we're like, okay, as an example, it's not that, oh, I can eat a little bit of gluten and cheat. For me, if I eat gluten, my digestive system is feeling it pretty much for 3 days if I'm not taking any enzymes. So it's more advanced. And then there's those folks that we were referring to earlier, extreme sensitivity, where it's actually an allergic response. It's not necessarily that it's not that they don't have enough enzymes, but the immune system attacks due to ingesting that food. And so celiac would be a great example of this. And in this situation, enzymes can be used if there is potential cross-contamination or if the cross-contamination has occurred. So many people take them prophylactically. They'll take them before going out to eat as a restaurant if they're just not feeling 100% confident that that restaurant is going to have good handling practices for food allergens. Or you can take them after the fact. I know that I've gone out and been like, all right, they said that was gluten-free, but there is no way. I got gluten and I know it. I'm having all my symptoms. And so they can be taken both ways. But the point is that neither way is ever in replacement of the diet. Sometimes there we go. So food intolerances can look so variable and so different. I mentioned dairy and occasional heartburn earlier, but food intolerances can really be a core issue for why occasional heartburn is happening, or why constipation/diarrhea is happening, or especially that big bloating and distension, that uncomfortable feeling. We may think of food intolerances as like, oh, I'm a little gassy, but they can actually be much more extreme than that. And I didn't know until a couple of years ago that dairy had a really positive association with that heartburn that just keeps coming back over and over again. So digest spectrum is a beautiful solution for this in any one of those situations. Again, really re-emphasizing that it's not go ahead and eat whatever you want, but depending on what category you fall into, you can either take the enzymes and have a little cheat every once in a while, or go out to eat feeling a bit safer that you're going to have some protection from that extra enzyme activity. So what I love about Spectrum is that it has an enzyme. It's a protease, which breaks down the gluten protein. It's called DPP4, and it's a really cool protease that just goes right for the gluten protein. It's a specialist in that area. And then extremely high lactase to break down that dairy sugar. One thing about dairy is that if you get like a lot of bloating and a lot of gas, that's a sign that you may not be breaking down that dairy sugar because it starts fermenting right away. Versus if it feels more serious and there's a ton of cramping, that's often the casein or the dairy protein intolerance. And fortunately, in Digest Spectrum, we have both in very high amounts. And then xylanase helps to break down phenolic compounds, can support with FODMAP compounds. And so that is one, if somebody is following a FODMAP diet, Digest Spectrum is actually the one that I suggest. And then it's got a high dose, 600 units of alpha galactosidase. And that's for those beans that really can make you kind of gassy sometimes. So a lot of alpha galactosidase formulas out there are about half this dose. And so this is a really, really potent dose. Again, that gas, that bloating. But I know for me, if I take Digest Spectrum, and this happens especially when I travel, I may not eat the way I really would normally eat at home. It can really, really lessen my negative response, if not personally totally eliminate it. So that's food intolerances and general digestion, but heartburn is something that is just a huge, huge issue, because if we have 30% of Americans suffer once a week from heartburn, and 10% have heartburn every single day. These are NIH numbers. These aren't my fancy numbers. 30% have heartburn once a week and 10% have heartburn every day. This is huge. It is absolutely no wonder that over-the-counter heartburn medications are growing year after year after year. And there's so many reasons for heartburn to occur. And one of them is a little surprising. And it's actually that we don't have enough digestive enzymes. Because if we think about what happens in the stomach when we eat food, a lot of stomach acid is secreted, and in those gastric secretions, we have some enzymes. But if we are not able to break down the food in the stomach with the help of enzymes, then what else is there left? There's no other tool except squirting out a whole bunch of acid, because guess what? One way or another, that food has to liquefy in the stomach so that it can start to transfer into the small intestines. And, we want it to get as far along in that process as possible. But if we don't have enough enzymes, we're going to start to create a lot of acid to do that job. So that's why over the years, we've seen many times people start taking a gentler digestive enzyme, and the heartburn can really be alleviated by just that. And stomach acid has gotten a really bad rap. We're like, oh, I have too much stomach acid. It's terrible. But it is so important. It's that preliminary breakdown of food. That's why we have a lot of protein and fat digesting enzymes that occur in the stomach, is because those are the two hardest things to digest. And also, I call it the digestive defense system. It's that acid is really, really beneficial for the destruction of invaders, pathogens that we've swallowed. That acid helps to break it down. Why would we ever want to shut that down too much for too long of a period of time? Yes, there are instances where we do need to really, slow that stomach acid production. This is especially true if somebody is working with their doctor to heal from an ulcer. But these medications were never designed to be taken long term. The human design needs stomach acid in order to function optimally. We don't want to suppress this or even neutralize it for any long-term period. So my heart breaks a little bit when I think about the high percentage of Americans who are suffering so much with occasional heartburn. I have to say occasional because it's an FDA thing, but who are suffering so much. And yet they're not getting the help they need. And then they're wondering, okay, so if let's just play this out. We're not breaking down our food properly in the stomach. It's not able to digest as well. We may not have as much energy because we are not getting the nutrients out of our food. We may start to have further downstream effects because there's putrefying food in our gut, which can lead to an imbalance in pH, which then subsequently can lead to our positive microflora or even those probiotics not being able to populate in the gut. It's a really simple 1, 2, 3, and we know how important the gut is to our immune system. So we've all been through this in recent years, like everybody's freaked out about their immune system, taking all the things for their immune system, but they're shutting their stomach acid down. It's a really, really important part of our immune system. So what are we going to do about it? Well, okay, we all know the dietary things, but what I always go back to is that if it was only like too much beer, chicken wings, fatty foods, then we wouldn't have such a high percentage of Americans who are suffering. I just think that I've known too many people personally who are like, I'm doing everything right. And they've gone on, really strict diets and still no help. And that again is because they may not have enough enzymes. But what happens if the heartburn does occur? Well, there's something really cool called alginate, and it's from seaweed. And if you've ever picked up seaweed or held it, it's got that slippery kind of slimy, viscous texture to it. So it's just like that. And this alginic acid was actually launched in 1964 in the EU under the name gastric viscosity control, and that is Gaviscon. And we still have that product today, both in the EU and the US, but it's really not very popular in the US. So what happens is when we eat this seaweed, and trust me, we've put it into a delicious chewable. I'm not going to ask you to go eat seaweed off the beach. When we eat that seaweed, it becomes inflated with water. It really, really bloats up, and it sits on top of the acid in the stomach. So this is beautiful because what it's doing is it's allowing the acid to do its job. It's allowing for that food breakdown and for the breakdown of any pathogenic protein-based invaders, but it's not allowing the acid to come up into the esophagus where we feel heartburn. So it's actually just keeping it in place. And as it goes through the digestive system, it does dissolve. It's actually a really good thing to take. It has some mild cleansing properties, detoxifying properties, because it can pick up some things in the intestines as it goes. So I love these kinds of formulas because we're not taking anything away from how the stomach is supposed to work. We're just saying, okay, well, we're figuring out why there's too much acid. We're going to keep it where it belongs. And it's also lovely because you don't have to take it ongoing. You can take it as needed. I get heartburn a couple of times a year, maybe. Usually it's related to, going out to eat. So you can take it as needed, whereas many medications, you do have to take them every day, whether you need them or not, and nobody would know the difference. So the benefits is that it works very, very fast, but it lasts a really long time. Usually, depending on if it's the liquid or the chewable, I see it work in about 3 minutes. The liquid definitely a little bit faster. It soothes and rebuilds the GI, so it's doing other kinds of good work in the GI, and it's yummy. So it's not seaweed flavored, it's orange cream flavored, and it's super delicious. What I was very happy to find when I did more research on clinicals on it is that the alginate-based formulations are more effective in relieving reflux symptoms, including heartburn, vomiting, and belching, with a longer duration. And these formulas are also non-inferior to omeprazole, which is a really popular over-the-counter proton pump inhibitor medication. Achieving a heartburn-free period in patients with moderate heartburn. This is NIH. You can go find this anywhere. It's like we have a natural solution that's really good for you. I mean, it's good for your GI. It's not shutting down stomach acid. It's buying you some time to figure out why so much stomach acid. Is it dietary? And by the way, it's not all bad things that can really create the situation. Fatty foods, including the healthy fats, relax the bottom part of the esophagus, and so it just starts to naturally open. We have a valve that sits at the bottom of our esophagus, and it's supposed to stay closed unless it's letting food through. But things like fatty foods can really relax. It's called the lower esophageal sphincter. Coffee can, um, yoga can. Bodybuilders get this a lot because they're actually pressing weight right here if they're bench pressing. So a lot of things will relax that lower esophageal sphincter that we wouldn't normally connect as being bad. And then the other can be bacterial infection. If there is some bacterial infection, then we have an issue, and that's actually the reason that too much acid is being produced. So again, it's not just the beer and chicken wings. It can happen for so many reasons. And another reason that it can happen is if there is undigested food in the gut for a long period of time, and say we've gotten to that point of dysbiosis, like now someone is carrying around some undigested, I'm going to call it toxic food material in their gut because it's fermenting, it's putrefying, all of that. It can cause gas, which pushes up on the stomach. When it pushes up on the stomach, it pushes acid up into that lower part of our esophagus. So what feels like heartburn actually started lower in the GI. And that's something that this is why a digestive enzyme can also be really helpful in these cases, is because we're able to break down that food. And this is why we see people who have SIBO and IBS and other things like that. They are often saying, oh, and I have heartburn. I can't digest anything, and I have heartburn. I have irregularity. One day I'm constipated. The next day it's too much. The next day it's too little. And it's because that food isn't breaking down in the gut. It's one big reason that this happens. And onto that, so many are suffering from chronic constipation, and it's 3 times more common in women than in men. Sorry, everybody. What we commonly use, even in the natural food stores, are stimulant or osmotic laxatives. So stimulant laxatives would be things like some of our favorite herbs that are used, senna and cascara sagrada. They have alkaloids in those plants which literally stimulate the bowels to move. And then the osmotic laxatives draw a bunch of water into the lower GI, and so the bowels are kind of forced to move. Magnesium oxide is one of the ones that's a typical natural foods osmotic laxative. Again, is it okay for a few days? Sure. You're on vacation and you haven't pooped in a little while? Sure. But people are using these ongoing. And what that means is that their bowel, which is a muscle, is growing weak over time. So dependence occurs because you need to keep taking more and more and more. So probiotics are also helpful. Remember, probiotics can also be enzyme creating machines. They can also help with that pH of the lower gut, but they're not always the complete solution for people. And then fiber can be helpful for many, but not everybody. Sometimes fiber can make it a lot worse. Remember that we produce that fiber digesting enzyme cellulase in our lower gut. And if our microbial family down there, our critters down there, are not healthy and happy, they're not producing a lot of that enzyme. And so what happens is the fiber settles in the gut, people start to get really bloated and really constipated, often quite gassy, and it has done the exact opposite of the intention. Also, especially with regard to dehydration. If you are working with ongoing constipation, rule number 1, please drink water. Like that is just such an easy thing that we think we got to get fancy with the solution. And really it's like, just drink some more water. So constipation can lead to some of those more serious challenges that we were talking about in the microbiome because it's not a clean environment. You didn't clean your house, and so it's going to get dirty and it's not going to function optimally. So kiwi is super interesting because it's been used in traditional Chinese medicine as a digestive tonic, and kiwi is non-stimulating. So yes, you can eat fresh kiwi every day, but in the instance where maybe that's not always available, maybe you don't like kiwi, maybe you don't want to spend $300 a month on kiwi, there is a supplement that you can take. What's also beautiful about kiwi, again, it's another one that kind of slimy texture. If you've ever cut a kiwi, you get that little bit of sliminess from it. So it's actually great because it's nourishing the mucilage that we need to have, this protective layering of healthy mucus that's in our gut. Kiwi is helping to make sure that it's working there with that slimy, slippery texture. A cool thing about that mucilage and why we want to keep it healthy is that's where a lot of our beneficial bacteria live as well. So kiwi has also been proven to enhance beneficial bacteria, even though there isn't any bacteria in it naturally. Also, no gas, cramping, urgency, the thing that happens when you take some of those traditional laxatives, won't cause dependency, and it's full of yummy antioxidant. So again, if you're not going to eat the kiwi fruit every day, we have a beautiful item called Kiwi Regularity. It's a chewable, and it's also delicious. It's kind of like if you were to have a kiwi not too tart, sweet tart. Really, really great. The dosage is 2, but what you can do if this is really an issue for you is you can start with a higher dose because you're helping to sort of start to juice that microbial bacteria, that positive population. And then the clinicals on it show that if you take it at a higher dose for a few days, you can then come way down on your dose and have the same kind of effect. So also, anytime we're thinking about, chronic issues with constipation, there's also a muscular contraction issue that's not happening. It's called peristalsis. And it's that muscular contraction that happens in our intestines, which is literally squeezing food from one side to the other. If someone who has had issues with this for a long time, that muscular contraction can get weak, and we have to kind of teach it how to work again. We have to start that ball rolling again. And the Kiwi Regularity is a really gentle way to do that. It is also safe. I've known lots of children who've been able to take this because it's yummy. I have a very good friend who has a 5-year-old that was on an over-the-counter called Miralax every day, which is one of those over-the-counter, not natural osmotic laxatives. And I'm like, oh my God, they're so little, and I'm freaking out. I was like, just try these. Just try them. And I turned my back, not thinking that the child would really like them very much at all, because this is a kind of a standard American diet kid, lots of macaroni and cheese, lots of chicken nuggets, nothing natural. I turned my back for 10 minutes and the child had eaten half the bottle. I was like, okay, we're going to watch out for the next day. Nothing at all bad occurred, and we were able to start to correct that course away from that less healthy OTC towards a healthier option. Can also be beneficial in pregnancy, because a lot of times when women are pregnant, their guts are just all smushed up and they need just that little bit of extra help. So again, we wouldn't want to do that with any of those high alkaloid herbs that you would never want to use in that situation. So I just love that this formula is so gentle, and because it's really more helping to correct an issue. So if you have not enough bowel movements going on, that slippery nature, the microbiome help, the kiwi enzymes themselves, that's helping to move things along. But what's really cool about it is that if you got too much action happening, actually it can help to bind together the stool so that you're not getting that same kind of diarrhea. So again, going back to food intolerances, a lot of times that's an issue. It's just like, for me, it's just a few days of this is a bad thing, I ate the wrong thing, and this is what's happening. I've seen it with my own eyes with friends of mine. I'm like, here, just try it. And it's like, that issue is gone. And they didn't have to take any medications to make that happen. So I really, really love this product because it is dealing with something that so many Americans are having problems with, and it's doing it in a really gentle way. So what happens when you've tried everything and just the pieces aren't coming together? Like sometimes I have constipation, sometimes I have bloating, sometimes it's occasional heartburn, sometimes it's nausea, it's debilitating. And this can all fall under this umbrella of, it's either called delayed gastric emptying or gastroparesis. And it's getting more and more popular in conversation. I'm starting to hear about gastroparesis more and more. And so if you look at the prevalence of people who are diagnosed, it's really, really low. It's like under 1%. And yet, if we look at this constellation of symptoms, if you were to go to a traditional gastro doc, or even if you were to take yourself to the pharmacy, you'd be like, well, I need this for heartburn. I need this for my constipation. I'm going to buy some, anti-nausea medication because that's not working either, and not realizing that there's really an underlying issue. My point being is it's not getting treated. It's getting treated in a patchwork quilt kind of way that never really gets to any underlying issue. And yet, look at this in correlation with the top symptoms that people are experiencing when it comes to digestive distress, the constipation, the bloating, the heartburn. And then what's really a pain in the butt for people about it is that it can produce a lot of nausea. And that's kind of the tell I've learned, is if you have a couple of things or more going on, it may be delayed gastric emptying. And if it's something and nausea, it's probably pretty likely delayed gastric emptying. So what can happen, because the stomach isn't opening and it's literally delayed in the emptying, too much acid can accumulate and come up, and that feels like heartburn again. So maybe you don't have an over acid production issue, but what you do have is the stomach is an emptying issue. And there's some really beautiful herbs we're going to talk about in a minute. And then again, because that peristalsis may not be occurring, that muscular contraction, partially digested food is hanging out for way too long in the gut. What happens? More gas. What happens with gas? Just distension, bloating, but again, could be pushing up on the stomach. Things we don't think about. We just think, I have too much acid. No, it's coming from somewhere. There's no such thing as I just have a bad gut. There's a reason. And then there's a very high prevalence of SIBO in this population, again, because of that dysbiosis, that imbalance of pH that's occurring because of that rotting food, for lack of a better word. And this creates a whole host of symptoms that people have to end up really taking some more serious interventions with. And you can take very natural interventions as well. They don't have to be always the medications. Of course, sometimes that is the right thing to do, but there are some wonderful herbs that can help with this. So thinking about what's happening with delayed gastric emptying, the stomach isn't emptying at the proper rate, and the peristalsis in the GI isn't occurring in a proper time. This is also really popular for people who've had an issue for people who've had gastric bypass, because all of this action in the GI especially is controlled by what's called the enteric nervous system. So the nervous system that is surrounding our gut, which is a huge nervous system in our bodies. And with surgery, what happens sometimes is those nerves get nicked, and then they're not performing properly. So again, my heart goes out because people go in really looking to make a big improvement of their health with this procedure. They've tried other methods, it hasn't worked, so this is where they've ended up. And yet, a lot of times there's a very high percentage of people that end up with chronic constipation. And it really is this delayed gastric emptying because there's a little bit of nerve damage. So if we look at what can work, we just look right back to traditional herbs that have been thought about for digestion for hundreds and hundreds of years. Ginger. Who doesn't love ginger? We all love ginger. Some people don't love the taste of it, but we know what it can do. We've all reached for a cup of ginger tea to just help our tummies settle. We know it's safe, time tested. I mean, ginger's been used in so many cuisines throughout time. We're not worried about ginger and safety, right? What ginger is, it's really cool. It's called a prokinetic, meaning pro-movement. So it's creating movement in the stomach. We, in traditional medicine, traditional herbalism, we'd call that a warming tonic. But what it's actually doing is it's helping to create that movement with the volatile compounds and the constituents that are naturally occurring in ginger. And then the second part is artichoke leaf. Artichoke leaf has been used as a gentle bitter. And bitters are a certain class of herbs that, because of their bitter nature, they actually stimulate some bile secretions. And what's interesting is when bile is secreted from our livers, it starts at peristalsis. And so ginger and artichoke are like this beautiful 1-2 combination of addressing the stomach and addressing the GI in a very gentle formula. And our formula for this is called gut motility. So again, we're getting to the roots of what may be happening, what we see as a symptom, but not really knowing that Actually, it's something entirely else going on lower down in the GI that's happening because of just delayed motility, slow motility. And this can also happen, again, medications, but it can happen just due to sedentary lifestyle as well. So I think that this is a really under-realized issue for so many people. And again, at the end of the day, we can also add enzymes in to help to break down those undigested food materials. We're enhancing the natural emptying of the stomach, and we're promoting the transport of food through the GI tract with this really, really simple, beautiful formula. This formula has been studied pretty extensively, and the study on it was on about 60 adults, and they measured the gut motility, or the prodigest, which is the material, that combination, the special combination of ginger and artichoke leaf. And there was a 24% reduction in stomach size after taking the gut motility, which proves that the stomach was actually emptying. 24%, it's a pretty significant number. So this is really, can be a game-changing formula, because if you've ever known somebody who's like, I was like, I just got a bad stomach. Like, it's this one day, it's that another day, then I'm nauseous. Sometimes it's seasonal. There's an allergy connection there, which hasn't quite been figured out, but sometimes they're like, I only get it in the spring. It can really be debilitating, and especially because of the nausea. So when you read about folks who have this issue, they'll say they feel like there are rocks in their stomach that never leave. And sometimes it can get so bad, the comment will be, it feels like I'm eating glass. Like, it is so dysregulated there, that what can also happen is people start to lose weight because they're so scared to eat. So this is really can be a very debilitating condition for people. And there's a solution. Yes, of course, you want to get a proper diagnosis through a gastro doc, but I've worked with people on my own that are like, oh, I got tested for gastroparesis. I don't have it. I did the test. They did the stomach emptying test. I'm like, well, you have nausea and you have heartburn and you have constipation. Why don't you just try this? And an enzyme, and like, life changer, game changer for people. So, if it looks like it and sounds like it, it may be that. And what's also so cool about all of these products, nothing can go wrong from them. I mean, ginger and artichoke, as old as time to be used for digestive issues. Kiwi, super gentle. And then a good digestive enzyme to help to break down the food, so that whole process is happening more easily. This is the holy trinity of what to do with delayed gastric emptying, and certainly something to try if you have that, like, I don't know what's going on. You can also add the heartburn soothe in with this to help to get you more comfortable quickly if that occasional heartburn is a situation. So what's the common denominator for all of these things? It's enzymes. If we think about energy, we're getting more nutrition out of our food, and our body doesn't have to work so hard at digestion all the time. We're addressing food enzymes or food intolerances with targeted enzymes that help to break down specific foods. Enzymes are very specific. You have to know what you're doing when you formulate, and that is what Enzymedica specializes in. I didn't really touch on it too much, but this mental health, this mental well-being, we have a nerve that goes from our gut to our brain and our brain to our gut called the vagus nerve. I call it the Viva Las Vegas nerve, because it's like what happens in the gut doesn't stay in the gut. It really does communicate strongly into our brains. And a lot of times people will have low energy, lack of focus, or other even more serious conditions, all due to a food intolerance that's causing a dysregulated message between the brain and the gut. Irregularity, we know this, like, if you want to actually have regular bowel movements, one of the first steps is to be able to break down your food, and enzymes will do this. And then, of course, the occasional heartburn. We've talked about so many different reasons for this, but it's not just, oh, I produce too much acid. It really can start much lower down, and that push up of gas, or not being able to empty the stomach, which is creating an artificial situation of the feeling of too much acid. So